Another agent of white supremacy has been unmasked. So, Mr. Kersey, tell me the news about the military.
Wish it didn't have to. Wish you could say our military had been mobilized on the border and that we were seeing posse comitatus enacted so that these Soros judge DAs were rounded up, but unfortunately, it's the exact opposite. One of my favorite individuals on Twitter is a gentleman by the name of Jesse Kelly. He's a conservative radio show host. He completely understands the left, and I know you won't agree with what I'm about to say, but he has a book coming out where he aligns the left with communists, and I know you differ with that, but I think it is an effective tool. Well, he came out, conservative commentator and frequent Fox News guest, Mr. Jesse Kelly. He was a Marine, by the way. He has called for white people to seriously consider abandoning the U.S. military over its woke priorities. Quote, getting to the point where white people should seriously consider walking away from the military and just letting it implode on itself. If you want to serve, go run for sheriff and prepare your community for the times to come, he tweeted last Wednesday. Now, the controversial tweet, I don't think it's controversial. I think it's very sane and logical. But this news story said, controversial tweet linked to a story about the military's forever expanding woke agenda, particularly its focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What he was tweeting about was a piece that was published by Fox News about how last month the U.S. Air Force went on a hiring spree to recruit a handful of senior-level diversity, equity, and inclusion managers. I have no idea what that has to do with the F-22 or F-16, but
they fly better. They fly better when one-legged lesbian Nigerians are flying them. You know that. Come on.
Yeah, you know what? You took the words right out of my mouth. To place in posts across the country, the positions reportedly pay between $82,000 to $180,000 per year, depending upon the specific position and location.
Diversity don't come cheap, clearly.
Diversity don't come cheap, but that's one of those stories where our Russian and Chinese friends, when they're meeting right now, their generals, their top-rated Air Force generals, they're laughing, getting a good chortle out of this type of story. But it's this story that I'm sure they're truly laughing about. This is from the Air Force Times. This is by a piece by Colonel Ben Johnson. He's an active deputy Air Force officer. The views expressed are the personal views of the author and do not represent the official views of the Air Force, DoD, or Air Force Times. However, they still published this piece. And the headline was, Dear White Colonel, we must address our blind spots around race. Now, the colonel that wrote this piece, he is a Caucasian. I'm sure he was willingly one who took a knee, though, Mr. Taylor, back in June of 2020 when the George Floyd madness started.
And it sounds like he is psychologically taking a knee ever since.
I think he's acquiesced, capitulated, and surrendered whatever shred of dignity he had to the DEI, mindset. Here's what he wrote. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I encourage our listeners to go track it down again. It's Dear White Colonel, we must address our blind spots around race. It was published in the mid of March 2023 at the Air Force Times. Quote, as white colonels, you and I are the biggest barriers to change if we do not personally address racial injustice in our Air Force. Like right then and there, it's like, why don't you resign, pal?
Yeah.
Why are you
a problem? Clear out.
Yeah. Why are you a colonel? Why don't you go ahead and give up that pension and give up all, give your rank to a more deserving person of color. Now, defensiveness is a predictable response by white people to any discussion of racial injustice. White colonels are no exception. We are largely blind to institutional racism, and we take offense to any suggestion that our system advantaged us at the expense of others. I can tell you that even back in the mid 2000s, like 2004, 2005, this type of thinking was going on in the Air Force. There were already people who said that the Air Force officer corps was too white.
2004, 2005? They've been jabbering like this since the 1990s, 1980s. Good grief.
Yeah, well, having been involved and having dealt with all this, I was mortified. I'm like, well, wait a second. Don't we want the best people regardless? And merit matters? No, you're right. Yeah. That I addressed this letter to white colonels made many of you uneasy, and we have similar white defensiveness play out in many of our conversations since the murder of George Floyd. In a meeting with other white colonels, I drew attention to the reality that racial tension remains an important issue to address. after another black man was killed by police and a restaurant was burned down during the ensuing outcry. This guy sounds like the most insufferable prick imaginable. I dealt with some people when I was in the Air Force ROTC, and I can imagine some of these guys are actually about colonels at this point. I can't even tell you just the smugness that comes out when you read this article. It's the kind of person you're like, whose side is this guy fighting on? Two white colonels responded by joking about the burned down restaurant. My introduction of race into the conversation created social discomfort, which they tried to ameliorate with humor. A white colonel then brought up his concern with the way a black officer on the base portrayed the problem of racial injustice. Rather than considering the issue, we took a detour to question the methods and message of the black officer. A white colonel worried that a wing-level discussion about the disproportionate rate of Article 15s given to black airmen would have a chilling effect on holding minorities accountable and would degrade good order and discipline. He deflected meaningful discussion of racial injustice in the Air Force by summarily stating that such discussion damaged the foundation of military discipline. Well, you and I know that a very strange thing happened at the Air Force Academy Prep School where a black student wrote racial things on his door. It was blamed on the entire, white student body, and then the colonel who was overseeing all this, I think he got an ADL award, even though it was a race hoax.
Could have been. That sounds like the ADL to me. Of course, you know what an Article 15 is.
I'll let you go ahead and explain it.
Okay. That is a discharge. That is a court martial. And what they are clearly talking about is the high rate with which blacks in particular, and perhaps other non-whites, get these discharges. And one guy is saying, we've got to go easy on that. And then the other guy is saying, if you go easy on that, then there will be no discipline in the Army. And so this other guy is saying, well, if they get more Article 15s, it's because of systemic racism. You fool. I imagine that's how the conversation went.
Well, that's exactly how the conversation goes. I'll read this when we'll be done, because this is the type of article where you realize why we need a national divorce. When you have a white colonel who's basically saying discipline doesn't matter if it inconveniences blacks at a disproportionate rate, is basically what he's saying. A white colonel raised his disagreement with a black senior enlisted leader's story of being offered an Article 15 for his boisterous singing personality when he was an airman. When the black enlisted leader told the story, he was the only black person in the room, the only person with first-hand experience on the receiving end of unbalanced Article 15s. By later discrediting the story, the white colonel, ended further examination of the role of cultural disciplines on the role of cultural difference on discipline decisions by supervisors. Again, let's just stop with this article here and think about what that colonel just said. We should examine the role of cultural difference on discipline decision by supervisors. That means a racial lens must be placed on the way that individuals are acting based on cultural racial differences.
Well, can you really be thrown out of the Air Force for boisterous singing? It seems to me you'd have to be doing your boisterous singing in a particularly inappropriate place for that to be the subject of disciplinary procedure. But who knows?
What do you think the odds were he was singing Zippity Doodah Zippity Day?
Very low.